As you guys know, if you're not familiar, I studied economics in undergrad, and I'm doing it in grad school as well right now in Washington, D.C. The article that I'm going to be talking about, I'll post in the description down below, so if you'd like to read it, so you know what I'm talking about, as well as all the links for the data and things that I'm going to be mentioning will be down below as well. So basically, this is just a reply to the blog post, why income inequality is stupid. The reason I wanted to do a video, first of all, is because I hate responding via comments and like long form posts, mainly because it like dehumanizes people, and I think it's easier to just have a dialogue when you can see the person's face and kind of like understand where they're coming from. And I don't want to come off as condescending or anything like that. So I think it's easier to see that over a video. So basically, without further ado, he kind of gets to the point. I think he's misunderstanding what income inequality is, and kind of what people are saying and why income inequality is wrong. Income inequality is a second-order problem, so if you're familiar with calculus or anything like that, it's like a rate of change issue. So yes, the economy grows, but it doesn't grow equally. So people at the top of the income spectrum, so the 1%, the 0.001%, the very, very top, are disproportionately gaining more wealth faster than everybody else at the bottom is gaining wealth. And some people are actually losing money in certain cases, but we'll talk about that in a second. But the first thing is, for a little historical context, this article doesn't talk about generational wealth at all, and the fact that minorities, people of color, immigrants, and women might not have the same generational wealth as men in terms of like households. So just especially like with African American households in the United States, there's not as much opportunity for generational wealth, whereas people who come from immigrants or even people who have been in the United States longer, simply because they didn't get their rights until more recently, and they haven't had as high-paying jobs and the same opportunities. I know we could talk about white flight and the rise of suburbia and how the rise of the inner city plight has kind of hurt African American communities disproportionately to white Americans, mainly because like schools are not as good, infrastructure is not as good, like just access to good jobs. So these are all things that contribute to generational wealth, and kind of how people just who are born into different households have different opportunities for growth. So it's not always that like, yeah, you might graduate from high school, but if you graduate from an inner city high school, that's not great. But I graduated from an AP program in the white suburban affluent areas. I have better chances of getting into college, getting a better job, and just having opportunities because of my surroundings and how I grew up with. So the article doesn't really talk about any of those things. But also it doesn't talk about, again, this is like a second-rate problem. Income inequality has to do with the fact that the people at the top are getting richer faster and at a faster rate than everybody else. So, like, costs of living have been rising drastically. Something that you'll see, again, a link in the bottom is the productivity pay gap. So productivity's been steadily rising since the 1970s, yet wages have been stagnant since the 1970s. People are not getting paid for being more productive. So people are producing more. They're helping their bosses make more money. They're helping whoever they work for make more money, but they're not seeing the benefit to that harder work. Yes, technology helps productivity a little bit, but they account for that. It's adjusting. Also, the rate of household debt, like per person. So we're not talking about like national debt. We're talking about like how much debt each household. So whether I'm my own household because I live by myself, I just did my taxes, but I have a family. So out of all the households in the United States, household debt per capita is rising. It's at the highest rate, or one of the highest rates it's been like historically. But then going back to history again. Tax rates. So during the peak time when the American economy was the best, between the 1940s after World War II through the 1960s, 70s, depending on when you ask people, the tax rates were highest then than they had ever been. So the highest tax rates, especially around the 50s, were in the 90% for the top income bracket. Also, the capital gains tax rate was even higher back then. So this article again doesn't address capital gains issues. So most rich people, once you get above a certain threshold, Most CEOs and people who are making boo money, when I say boo money, I'm talking about like 15 million and above. That's what I consider like the 1%, the top, like the half 1%, like the 0.001%. These are the insanely rich people. They make most of their money through capital gains. What that means is they're not getting paid salary. Like, yeah, they might get paid $500,000 a year, but they're a CEO, they get paid in stocks and bonds and assets, and they make interest off that. But those are taxed at a much lower level than everybody else's wages are. So a CEO might have millions of dollars in stock, and then he gets bonuses, which are not taxed at, well, it depends on how the bonus is given. A lot of times they'll give bonuses in just terms of more stock. So he makes, or she makes less, or has to pay less money on those because the capital gains tax rate is set lower than the income tax rate. And it's been low for a while. There's also the issue of tax loopholes and pass-throughs. So obviously as you get richer, the more money you have, you can pay better attorneys, better tax people like CPAs and such, or just have the political power to hire a lobbyist to lobby for loopholes in the tax system so that you can benefit from those loopholes. Or, one thing, you could have a nonprofit. Donald Trump is notorious for this. Nonprofits that don't actually function like nonprofits. So you donate to the nonprofit, you get the tax write-off, but then the nonprofit benefits the money back from you. There's whole issues with these things. But beyond that, so like things that contribute to this, has led to 63% of Americans, this was an article in 2016, can't afford a $500 expense were it to come up. So literally people, more than half of America cannot afford a $500 expense if they needed to. It just shows you how fragile the American economy is. Yes, capitalism has made the world and America better off, more than any other system that's been in place before, but that doesn't mean that we can't reform it and do better. Beyond that, before I get into some solutions, Saving Capitalism by Robert Reich, I'm not plugging this for any reason. It's just a really good book. I read this in high school, or actually in college. It came out my freshman year of college. It talks about, a lot of the right does fear-mongering and talks about how the left loves socialism. No, we just want to reform capitalism, make sure capitalism works for everyone. And I have some links to some Bloomberg articles where billionaires literally talk about how they are realizing that capitalism is not working correctly, and they're pushing for reforms because when we're going to go shift into economics to politics, if the system is not working for the majority of people, then that system starts to break down, and the people at the top feel the pressure from the people at the bottom. So there's either radical change, the French Revolution, stuff like that, or people start rioting, i.e. things like that. So the rich has their own self-interest in making sure that capitalism works well enough and is fair enough so that it doesn't cause... So the failings of capitalism don't cause its downfall. They want to make sure the system perpetuates itself. That being said, it's hard for people who are on the lower income brackets, myself included, to have investments, to start accruing this wealth, because investments by definition are not liquid. So if you need that $500 that you were going to invest for that thing that we were talking about, like if something comes up, your fridge breaks, you have a car accident, you have unexpected healthcare cost, you can't have that money in an investment account, because then now to take it out, you get penalized, and you'll lose all the money that you would have invested, and you might even end up having less money because they don't want you to take it out. So there's a lot of penalties for that. That being said, too, finance preys on poor people. So there's predatory lending and payday loans. So people who can't make ends meet because they don't make quite enough money get charged insane interest rates, like 500% interest. John Oliver and a lot of documentaries talk about this. They go into great depth about how these traps are built in and just keep people in cycles of poverty. Credit bureaus do the same thing. There's no transparency in any of these organizations. Really, credit bureaus shouldn't be private institutions. You should be able to know what goes in your credit score, how you can help make it better. It shouldn't be a secret thing that there's, it should be government run so that there's transparency, so that people know what to do and there's clear guidance, because right now the companies don't give you clear guidance, and there's been so many issues lately. Also, just legal things. Small claims court is set up like if you don't, if you know, like I worked at a job where I had a labor dispute over a couple $100 and it being a couple $1,000, but it didn't make enough the threshold to go into normal court, but no attorney was willing to help me because they couldn't make enough money off of it to justify their time, and I didn't feel confident enough in my legal abilities to go argue in front of court. And then I knew that if I took a company to court, they would hire an attorney and I wouldn't be able to argue against an attorney myself. So the system is just set up where people at the bottom right now in the income bracket do not benefit as much as people at the top. So now I'm going to kind of mention a couple videos that I think are really good. Vox has a great video, again, link down in the description, about how this just a really simple change in our tax code could really pay for things like college debt. We could pay for college debt 3 times over if we implemented this tax plan. Some other great stuff. Let's see here. What else did I have to talk about? I think I hit mostly all of it. Yeah, so the links will all be down in the description. Oh, healthcare costs. Like, so all these go into, like, the average person has all these costs, and healthcare is not free in the United States. So again, also, if you have something crazy come up, like you get cancer or something, healthcare costs are so extreme in the United States, most people can't pay for that. So just helping the middle class and the lower class, like, relieve these burdens, like, you know, whether it's healthcare, student debt, loan debt, car debt, it makes capitalism work better. And right now, it's really constricted. So that's what the book talks about. It's also a documentary on Netflix if you're not really into reading. So yeah, I'll have all these links down below. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments for me. Thanks.